Otherwise, you got to tear the engine apart, and then you got to get to the point where the problem is created from, which in most cases you don't want to do. Are they reliable? Are they going to keep you on the road? Is it practical to drive on a daily basis if it's one of your only cars? How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new here, do me a huge favor, go down and subscribe. Leave a like on this video before we get started. If you're watching this video, you're most likely looking for a Mazda Miata and looking for some common failure items in the cars. What goes wrong with them? They're Japanese cars from the 90s. Is there really that many things that can possibly fail in them? Are they reliable? Are they going to keep you on the road? Is it practical to drive on a daily basis if it's one of your only cars? Hopefully I can answer some of those questions, and hopefully this video will help you getting closer to buying a Miata. So what are the issues? Well, the first thing to keep in mind is these things are 30 years old at this point. So one of the biggest things that you're going to encounter when you look at Miatas are a lot of them are going to leak. Now, fixing the leaks is fairly simple for the most part. The hardest leak to really get to is the rear main seal, which involves the whole transmission coming out, and that one's not a fun one. And when you do that service, you're most likely going to do a clutch and a flywheel at the same time. The rear main seal is probably the biggest leak that I can think of, and the hardest one that you could kind of have. You can see if a car is leaking, get underneath it when you buy it, make sure you can see underneath. The biggest one you can see without getting underneath and everything is the valve cover gasket. You can see that one, it just sits right on top, and you can see how much it's leaking, whether it's leaking or not. So one thing to just keep in mind is they're going to have leaks. It's not the biggest deal to have them, and for the most part they should be pretty solvable and easily fixable. So the second thing is going to be the shifters. So when you're driving a Miata, you might notice the shifter feels very loose. Now, that is a very common issue that I've seen in a lot of Miatas. They have full shifter rebuild kits in order to make those shifters feel a little more direct and a little bit stronger, for lack of better terms. But if your car is having some of those issues and you're having some of those symptoms where it feels like it could be in really any gear and you can shake it around, and no matter what gear it's in, you might need a shifter rebuild in your car to make it feel a little bit better. Along with that, Miatas have a little bit of chatter in the transmission, so they make a kind of grinding noise, and it's not a full grinding noise like crunching gears or anything, but it makes a little bit of a weird noise while driving, and just know that's a normal Miata thing that most of the cars do. Some cars have it better than others, some cars are pretty bad, but it really shouldn't be something that's insanely loud. But when you do drive it, you'll notice a little bit of chatter coming from the transmission. I haven't really seen too many ways to fix that other than taking the transmission out. When you do a clutch job, you want to make sure you realign everything very well. So that's kind of the only thing I see to mitigate the issue a little bit, but most of them, if they do it, they're gonna do it. Talking about the transmissions, another common failure in the transmissions, or related with the transmission, is the slave and clutch master cylinder. It's very easy to replace, but in most cases I've seen them fail a lot, and mine has actually failed, I'm pretty sure, in my Miata as well. So it's something that I'm probably going to be fixing. You might as well replace both of them while you're at it. They're cheap, they're easy to fix, and it's not that big of a deal, but it is an issue that occurs. Now, another issue that happens in the motors is a little bit of lifter tick. Now, what this isn't really a catastrophic issue, but it's definitely something that doesn't sound good. My car had it because it had been leaking a little bit of oil, so with leaking a little bit of oil, the lifter tick started becoming a little bit more prevalent. If I come over here, start the car. In that video, you can hear a kind of knocking noise. It's not the engine knocking, but it is lifter tick in a Miata, so that's a kind of common issue that these cars have. A way to solve that is to add more oil in some cases, or run a different oil that might make it a little bit better. Otherwise, you got to tear the engine apart, and then you got to get to the point where the problem is created from, which in most cases you don't want to do. Moving on to the interior, another problem that the Miatas can have is just the brittle plastics breaking, and the cars are getting old. They're over 30 years old now. Things like air vents might not work properly, so it's something that you have to keep in mind that it's not the biggest deal to fix them, but it's definitely an issue that can occur. Also, things like the dash might be cracking a little bit, and you might have some wear and tear in the doors. That's all normal, not the biggest deal. You guys probably already know that though, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. And when you're stepping into the interior, one of the issues you might have is the door door handles might not work. I've seen it happen a couple times, but it's a very simple pin in most cases, or kind of like a clip that needs to be reattached. So if the door handle doesn't work, you can fix it, but I've seen it fail in a couple of cars, and a lot of people have brought it up. And then after opening the door and stepping in and turning the car on, you might see the airbag light flashing. When I was buying my Miata, I looked at a couple of different ones, and for the most part, I would say in about half of the cars that I drove, the airbag light was flashing. This doesn't mean the airbag's not working in most cases, but it's a service light that comes up, so something to keep in mind. If you open the shade up, it actually has the instructions in the sunshade of how to properly maintain the airbag and make that light go away. I'm not exactly sure how accurate that light is, but it is there. You can get rid of it if you want, so it's something to keep in mind. Now moving on to the biggest issue in the Miatas is rust. These cars rust pretty much anywhere that touches salt or even water in some cases. These cars have a water drain in the back. You always want to check kind of the rear 3/4 of the car and under the fenders, underneath the car. You really want to do your due diligence when you're buying a Miata to look out for rust. The number one thing that you should look out for is rust. If you can find a car without rust, it's something that is worth buying. When I was looking for my car, I was looking for one thing in specific. A car without rust that was in decent condition, and it took a long time to find it in the Midwest, but I would recommend you look through the cars because you can fix everything else in these cars. If they're rotting away, they're rotting away. So make sure you check the cars. In most cases, if you're getting a really cheap Miata, it's going to have a little bit of rust, but if you're looking for something that you want to hang on to for a couple of years, I wouldn't buy a rusted car, and plus you can most likely get your money back if you do spend the extra money now. When you go to sell it later, most people will want to buy a non-rusted car and pay a premium for a car that does not have any rust on it. One more thing I will mention before we end the video is the soft tops and the soft top latches. So soft tops like to crack, like to rip, tear. They're something that needs to be replaced in a decent amount of cars, but the latches also at the same time. The latches, sometimes they don't work properly. And in my car, my latches don't really work all too well, so it's something that you have to keep in mind, and something that is also another issue that happens in the cars. Now, are these cars unreliable, reliable? I would say these cars are pretty reliable, but the thing to keep in mind is these cars are getting old. You have to look out for things like the aging plastics, the aging seals, and now the rusting issues that they're starting to have. The cars aren't by any means unreliable. They're actually really reliable, they're cheap to maintain, and they're actually pretty easy to fix. So if you're looking for a Miata, they're fantastic cars. I hope you find a clean example, or the cleanest example that you can possibly find for the price point you're looking in. I love my Miata, it's super fun, and I can't wait to continue to do some awesome fun videos with it. I'm currently in the process of taking it apart, rebuilding it, whatnot, and I'm doing the interior first. So with all of that being said, I hope that you find the Miata that you're looking for, and that's all I have for this video. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and that's all I got.